like relationship stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
I totally forgot they won that year.
Oh, really?
And I think it's an interesting thing we can talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
mostly I think
Yeah.
it's about the sports, not the movie itself. But like,
Sure.
I imagine most people in England that year watching it knew that Arsenal had won, just like most
Yes.
people watching the American version knew the Red Sox had won.
Right.
But I definitely found I think I got a lot more out of it because I didn't know if they were going to win or not.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. That. Yeah, I've got a bunch of like little details I'm trying to write down that I think are funny.
Yep.
All right, I'll just wing it.
Cool.
Oh, actually, let me just see if this a little less bright. That's probably better, right? Okay.
I'm definitely getting a lot of background noise, but I should be able to take that out.
Oh, my computer sounds like an airplane that's preparing for takeoff, and there's just nothing to be done about it.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
So,
okay, here we go.
Good luck editing. I will try not to make too many chair noises, at least.
Did you try to be quiet? Yeah. Have a period where you're not doing much while I'm talking, and then we should be fine. Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we are going way back. We're going back to one of the first fandoms that I ever became a part of, and we're doing it with one of the first co-hosts I ever had. Paul Hoppy is here to talk to me about sports. Paul Hoppy, our original co-host, is here to talk to me about sports fandom. We're going to be looking at it through the lens of the movie Fever Pitch, which came out, I think, about 20, 30 years ago. It's a British movie, Colin Firth.
28, yeah.
28, thank you. There is a American version with Jimmy Fallon, which we'll probably reference a little bit. But we're not even talking about that movie. We're talking about fandom in general of sports and what goes into being a fan, and especially what goes into riding through the highs and the lows of sports and why we hang on to it and whether that's a good thing or not. With all that, I am wearing a Mets shirt, for those of you who can see. That was kind of my first fandom. Well, my first sports fandom, at least. I have always been a Star Wars person, first and foremost, but I became a Mets fan when I was maybe like 6 or 7 years old. The Jets and the Knicks got added in later, but baseball has always been my first love. Paul, what about you? What role has sports fandom played in your life as a young kid, but now kind of more recent?
Yeah, I'd say I was always more of an Ets fan. Like, I didn't actually watch basketball, but I was like, clearly I have to root for the Nets and the Jets.
Okay, I like it. I like it.
You know,
yeah.
I'm not sure if we're gonna like go through the obituaries today, but
Robert Redford did pass away, who starred in one of the best baseball movies of all time, The Natural.
And I had mentioned to you that I thought my kind of introduction to baseball was when the Royals won the World Series in 1985, because my mom's from Kansas City, and she was a huge baseball fan as a kid. She was a Yankees fan, mostly because I guess the Kansas City teams were always the farm teams for the Yankees.
In the 70s and 80s, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
In the 50s and 40s and 60s, pretty much even through the aughts, right? I mean, Johnny Damon played. Well, anyway. But then I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, The Natural came out in 1984. And I probably saw it like in the theater, you know, the year after Return of the Jedi. Speaking of, you know, various fandoms. And that might actually be the movie that got me interested in baseball. And then the fact that my mom was a Royals fan and they won the World Series. And then I was like, oh, I'll be a Mets fan. There's a 100-foot mural of Dwight Gooden outside my bedroom window. And yeah, of course, they'll win the World Series the first year I'm a fan, you know? Yeah. So I like to take credit for that. But unfortunately, we can only have one first year as a fan. So I have no more magic to bestow. And as a result, they haven't won one since then.
Magic has not been bestowed or bestowed. It's been all downhill since then.
Exactly. Although, you know, last year was what I would call a very magical year for the Mets. And just in terms of like the role in my life as a kid, it was a huge deal from about the time when I was 8 until maybe 12, you know, somewhere 11, 12, I started getting into, you know, like role-playing games and soccer, actually.
Yep.
Interestingly, related to like Fever Pitch, and then, you know, various other things, music as well. And so I kind of drifted away from baseball due to a variety of factors, but then came back to it sort of like young adulthood, partially thanks to steroids, I think, like for real, like the whole 1998 home run chase, like it was like, you know, there were big headlines that were like, oh, wow, these are records that have stood for decades. And, you know, and then it didn't hurt that like the Mets were good, and it didn't hurt that I had friends like you who were into it. And, you know, we went to some games, we watched some epic games while waiting to go play poker. And we're like, how is this game still going?
We watched some games while playing poker.
That too.
At places that aren't around anymore, but we're mentioning around.
And, you know, I mean, anybody who goes and plays poker live in a casino or in a card room, probably it's hard to not like witness sports to some extent, right? Like it's always there on the TV and such. So
and that's true at casinos, it's true at bars, it's true now at a lot of barbershops. I mean, it's always been true. You know, any place where men are thought to gather, you will often find that. Yeah,
exactly. And to be honest, like, you know, it became a bit more of a kind of like intellectual pursuit, like stats and sabermetrics and stuff, and thinking about like player value and like roster construction and stuff like that. But once I went back to playing a lot of live poker, I really did find it a you know, like useful, like basically just being able to speak baseball and to some extent other sports, but not so much, but mostly just like being able to have conversations with people I never met before, might not have a lot in common with in terms of other interests. And, you know, there's a game on, you just talk about it and talk about what's going on in the league and whatever. And, you know, I had a neighbor who just moved, but who I can't say I had a lot in common with. And, you know, definitely political differences. And every time you kind of, you know, steer the conversation, like mention something like that, I'd be like, how about those Phillies, you know?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, the Phillies. I was probably still mad at the Phillies, even though they just clinched the NL East, you know? But, and I'm like, okay, so that makes sense. And this is what I've heard about Phillies fans. But just like something to talk to someone about when maybe that's like maybe a little more interesting than the weather. But in contexts where personally, like I would maybe feel kind of awkward or not feel like I had a lot to say, it's like, well, here's something concrete that we can talk about and have opinions about, and like maybe get a little excited about, a little worked up about, or not. And then, you know, and then sometimes you get into other conversations, but it's a way to kind of become friendly with someone, whether or not it's actually friends with them.
It's a social lubricant in that regard.
Right, exactly. Yeah, without getting drunk, basically.
Right. Although often the two go hand in hand.
Often they go together, yes, but they certainly don't have to.
Exactly. You know, for me, my father was a fan of certain teams, and baseball was a big part of his life growing up. He was a big Brooklyn Dodgers fan. I've talked about how Jackie Robinson was kind of like the head of civil rights stuff for him. You know, and he taught me about the importance of that. But in terms, and like he's a fan of certain teams. I think in many ways my mother was more a fan of sports as a whole. And she loves sports, and she taught me a very similar thing about that. She taught me kind of one of the best ways to have conversations with people is to be able to know about the game. You know, she always say, just know what happened in the game last night. And I think part of this, was something that she had learned. You know, she was one of the first women at an Ivy League law school. She was one of the first women at her law firm. You know, she had kind of been part of that wave. It was like, okay, I got to be like the boys to fit in. And so, and I think we can get into a lot of gender stuff about whether, like, you know, there should be other things. Most recently this year, I saw a lot of, in the same way there's a lot of videos out there of like women being like, hey girls, let's all know about football so that we can have those conversations. I saw a lot of videos from guys being like, guys, here's what you need to know what happened on Love Island last night, because that's what the women at your office are going to be talking about. And I love both, so I was happy for both. But yeah, I always had that idea of sports as with certain exceptions, which we'll talk about, but sports as a way to open doors, to start a conversation with a stranger when I needed to pass the time, you know, if you're just kind of bored in line or stuff like that, or, you know, you're kind of hanging out in an uncomfortable situation. And even as you said, with people where it's not opening a new conversation, it's finding a safe topic. You talked about your neighbor. I've certainly had that, but also I've talked about how my father and I had a really volatile relationship for many years. There were a number of years around high school and college where the only thing we could safely talk about was sports.
Right.
And not only just that we could talk about it, but it was a love that we shared. And I still have a distinct memory of when one of the years when the Knicks were in the playoffs in the early 90s, and he and I would, the game was on, he and I were just having a knockdown, drag-out fight, screaming at each other, and there was some kind of epic, like, late game comeback that the Knicks started to do, and we started kind of more and more pausing to watch a play, and eventually we just stopped fighting and watched the rest of the game and, like, hugged when the Knicks won in overtime.
Yeah.
And, you know, it didn't change anything. We had a terrible fight again the next night because it was a bad relationship.
But it was like a reprieve, right?
Yeah, it very much was. And I've always... So Fever Pitch is a movie about Colin Firth playing very against type. It's a fun movie. We're not really going to do a review of it today. But it's one of my favorite movies about the importance of fandom of sports to someone. And one thing it really talks about is how much being a fan in the main characters in that story's life, it's something he's been since he was a little kid. And it's one of the only things that he's held on to for that much of his life. And yeah, so I'm glad we're kind of talking about it in these terms because I think it kind of really sets the table of this has been something that's kind of like been a through line, at least for my life, and it sounds like for your life, since the beginning. Yeah.
I mean, I would hesitate to use the word through line because, and I did kind of resonate with that line in the movie, where at one point he says maybe everyone should want something they've always wanted, you know, and just the idea of having this sort of consistency of something that's kind of always there. You know, there's always the next season, the next season. Except in 2020 when there was definitely no baseball season. It didn't happen. It doesn't count. And like 94 when actually, anyway,
we'll get canceled because of the strike. And
right. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, who actually had been a, I don't know, semi-pro or like minor league baseball player or whatever as a young man. He actually died that year, like right around when the World Series would have been, which was like really weird, you know. Yeah. Because he was actually born in 1903, the year of the first World Series.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he was born the year of the first World Series and then died the year of the second World Series that didn't happen because in 1904, the Giants were like, was it the Giants or the Pirates?
I mean,
the National League team was like, we're not going to play the AL team. They're not good enough.
I've joked before that my mom died so she wouldn't have to see Trump win.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's similar kind of idea there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's so I've definitely come and gone repeatedly, I think, you know, and sometimes just as a matter of sort of life changing and getting other interests, which has been a theme with other interests as well, like martial arts. I went in and out of music, poker.
Yeah.
But and then sometimes more deliberately or in a deliberate attempt that may have failed. In like 2011, I was like, I'm not a Mets fan anymore. That's it.
Yeah.
I, you know, not because they weren't doing well, but because I really didn't like their front office. I hated the direction the team was going in. And I was like on strike. And I haven't actually spent a penny on Major League Baseball since then. Yeah. And I went a number of years not really rooting for the Mets, but like following them and trying to pick another team. You know, like I was like, oh, maybe I'll root for the Cubs, you know, because they haven't won in forever. That would have worked out pretty well. But I just couldn't, you know, the Blue Jays are like my AL team. But it's just it's hard to like when you have this history with one team. I think it's really hard to like then go and be like, no, this is my new team. I mean, I know people from LA who were Dodgers fans and moved to New York and became Yankees fans. And I'm like, what? Like it's
I've been trying to root for the Minnesota team since I moved here, and I do like going to their games. And I mean, Minnesota's great; I love it, but it's just never going to be in my blood the way the Mets are. And it's an exciting. I think the discussion there over through lines makes a lot of sense because I have never been. I have definitely kind of waxed and waned in terms of how strong a part in my life my fandom played.
Yeah,
but I think I've been probably more consistently there than you have.
Yes.
But also when you dive deep, you dive really deep.
So
like a lot of times, like we'll have like when Paul would be getting back into the sport, I'll be like telling him a lot more about the history and stuff. And then as we keep going, I'm like, okay, now Paul's going to take over, and you know, I have statistical questions. You're the one who's going to tell me all the details. And the Mets have had a really rotating door on their roster, and often I'm like, all right, I don't know who this new pitcher is. Paul, tell me about him. You know?
Yeah, I'm like, actually, you saw him pitch, even though you know, but like, I mean, they've had 45 pitchers this year. It's ridiculous. It ties a major league record. Plus, at least 2 pitchers who have been on the roster and didn't pitch. Right. But yeah. When I get into it, that's how I am with everything, though, which is probably why it's harder for me to consistently stick with everything. Because there's just not enough hours in the day.
Right.
You know.
Well, and that's kind of one thing I found interesting about this movie is because, you know, it isn't. I think you could classify it as a rom-com in some ways. I think it's really interesting. Like, sort of, it is a story about 2 people who fall in love and figure out if they're going to be together or not.
Yeah.
But it also is just a story of this man's. Like, in many ways, it's about his love of football, world football, what we would call soccer here, and him learning to balance that with the rest of his life, and whether that's a good thing or not. And I think. So to me, partly I was saying that because I think like he is a much more obsessed fan than I've ever been.
Sure,
that I think you can connect with in some ways. Although for him, it's also particularly because when the movie was made, but also just soccer is not as statistically based a game as baseball is, and there isn't really a sabermetric culture in the same way. So I think it's a lot more for him. Like for him, there's a lot more about like the camaraderie of going to the game and knowing the chants and the songs, which is also just a much bigger part of European and English sports, especially that I kind of wish we had here, although we do in a lot of college sports. And I want to get into all that, but I want to just talk about one other period of my life as a fan that I think intersected with your life as a fan, which is the fact that Paul and I have been friends since high school. We became friends, I believe, when I was a sophomore and you were a freshman.
No, sorry. I was a sophomore, you were a junior.
Yeah, that's correct. So early, mid-'90s, probably like 93, 94.
94, October 1994.
Yes, okay, so that would actually perfectly explain it then, because we figured out quickly, you know, we were kind of both on the outskirts of a kind of like goth punk subculture in our various schools. We didn't go to the same school, but our friend groups overlapped a lot. We were very involved in role-playing games. We were involved in a lot of that kind of stuff. We figured out we were both huge Star Wars fans eventually. I think we probably had been really close friends for a couple of years before we both figured out we were baseball fans and Mets fans, and that was something we could connect with.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I wonder. Because I don't remember how long I had. I certainly wasn't talking about baseball in 1994.
Right.
You know, I had been drifting through, like, basically once I started high school, I wasn't really following baseball. But then, you know, the way I kind of remember it was like as the strike being this sort of like final, like, okay, that's it. But like it was left.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I definitely went on strike as a fan.
Yeah.
I think that was probably a big part of it, that it was late, you know, fall of 94 when we first met.
Yeah. And that was definitely that was a that was less for me of a like shutting off the faucet and more just like stopping the drip, because like it had been you know, like in 87 I went to tons of games, and then 88, and then 89 a little less in 90, a little less in 91, and by like 92, 93, you know, I was like, yeah, there's baseball, and maybe I'll listen to some games on the radio or something here and there.
But just for a quick history lesson for those who are not, I mean, I would assume most of our followers are deeply enmeshed in the history of the New York Mets from the late 80s.
Right.
And by the way, if you're not a sports ball fan, that's a term we'll be discussing and we'll be getting to you, I promise. With the Roy Kent grunt about the term that just you heard. But the Mets were a very good team right about the point that Paul and I became really big fans. They won the World Series in 86. They were contenders in 87. They got to the NLCS in 88, the playoffs. And then they started trading off a lot of our favorite players. A number of very good players got involved with drugs, and their careers never really took off and got really demonized in the press because there was an attitude when young black men involved with drugs was really seen as, there's a lot of stereotyping and bad media attention paid to the dangers of young black men involved in criminal activities, which, thank God, we don't have that today.
We've solved that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think it was that. But then I think also, let's talk about, we were part of a community where, for some good and maybe some not so great reasons, sports was not a big thing that our friends talked about a lot. Talk more about what that was like for you in terms of like, you were, especially back then, much less influenced by the opinions of others than I was. But But certainly, like in a lot of our friends groups, I think just asking you like, oh yeah, what did you think of the Met game last night was just not going to get you anywhere conversationally, whether you cared about the funny looks it might get you. What's kind of your memory of that and how that affected your interest in sports?
Yeah, I would say it's more that I became friends and started spending time with that group of people because I was more into those things and less into sports at that time.
Yeah.
Not that because I became friends with that group of people, I stopped following sports as much. You know? And I did like play a little soccer in high school. Goalie mostly for some like out in like Prospect Park, which our friend Adam got me to go to. And Adam was I think he was a Mets fan. Like he you know, and I remember actually going to some games of the playoffs with him in 2000. And you know, and then another friend of his that we became friends with later was a big Mets fan, you know, and then I know in college you had some friends that then I became friends with. And but yeah, it never, I never really thought of it that way. And I think it is more just you know what's interesting? Actually, when I did start to get more into baseball again, aside from just like, you know, watching the home run chase on TV a little bit here and there, it really was 1999. And it was later in 1999 when I started going out to play poker in poker clubs. And the game was on every night. And I was like, oh, I'll watch the game. You know, it's on while I'm playing poker. And then people were talking about it. And so I'd say I became friends with a bunch of people who weren't talking about baseball and weren't interested in baseball because I wasn't really that interested in it anymore. And I was interested in other things. But to a large extent, the rekindling of my interest had a lot to do with being around people who were interested and were talking about it. And, you know, like I had in my bedroom for years, like a Dwight Gooden beach towel and then like 2 posters and then like articles from like when he'd hit like home runs while as a pitcher. In 1987 when he came back from the suspension or rehab or whatever it was. And so, but now I'm thinking like, well, by the time we met, maybe those had been replaced by Metallica posters, you know?
Yeah, I definitely would have commented on them. If I saw them in your house.
Yeah. Although like you didn't come to my house that often. Mostly everybody was always at your house, but you had come to my house and I was like, okay, by then it probably was Metallica posters. But you know, but I would have had probably, you know, the little figures and whatever. I forget what those ones are called, but there's like, you know, I had all the probably 87 or 88 Mets in the little figures in their road uniforms and stuff.
The pre-bobbleheads.
Exactly.
Regular heads.
Yeah. Well, there were bobbleheads, but these were not those. I forget what these ones are called. But
I think what you're getting at, though, is really important because whatever the causality in terms of which comes first, for me, what we're kind of getting at is that for a lot of people, I think, and this movie certainly goes into it, and we're both talking about it, sports fandom is very communal. Like, it's very much I don't know if I could sit and watch the Met game and then have no one to talk about it. It would kind of be hard to not do that. And I mean, the extent to which I started this podcast because I wanted to watch a whole bunch of Marvel and I wanted to have people to talk about it. And stuff like that. And I think it's funny because my memory of is in the mid-90s, I stopped caring about baseball, but I didn't stop caring about sports. The Knicks were a really good team at that point, and I paid a lot of attention to the Knicks. I think I just that was one of my first experiences of code switching. Because again, that group of friends we had that were going to poetry readings a lot and playing Vampire the Masquerade and stuff, sports was just the height of non-coolness. And it's interesting because a lot of this movie is about kind of the judgments that the woman he starts seeing and some of her friends make about him as a sports fan. And him kind of acknowledging, there's some truth to it. Like the you know, and I think certainly like I would have been the first back then and still today to say like the role sports plays and economics and gender and stuff is not great. There's a lot of problems with it, but that as I'll actually ask you in a more specific way in a second, but like the way that people would talk about sports, I think was often kind of like, okay, this is not a topic I want to bring up right now. And for me, it was going to college where I met some people who were really big Met fans, and paying attention to that. And I think the fact that the Mets did get good again at that point, and then
it always helps.
And with you going to play poker a lot, and then those great, you know, great days we had watching the 98, the 99, and the 2000 Mets.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you bring up, you know, when people use the term sports ball and whatever. And I do actually remember one of our friends, I mean, who's been a guest of the pod, Logan.
Yeah.
You know, like talking about sports and like a actual distaste for sports and like that it's this negative thing and whatever. And that's like almost the only time I can like really remember that conversation or that coming up. And if people were having this conversation, I was just like, you know, letting it kind of just go past. Because I think I've never been that interested in like other people's disdain for various things.
Yeah.
You know,
and I was way too much. So
right.
You know, right.
I mean, it's probably good to be aware of it, but then not, you know, fixate on it. But yeah, it's a sort of thing where I'm like, oh, really? Like people think that, okay, you know, yeah.
Well, I think the mid '90s was also when a lot of those conversations were first really starting. And you know, the old stereotype of you know, the jocks are smashing the geeks into lockers and stuff like that. The mid late '90s was when Dungeons and Dragons had really been a thing for a while, but like with Vampire and a lot of other things, goth and role playing and geekdom and a lot of these things were first starting to like, you know, really take off as a social thing. And I think so there started to be some really some social cachet to the idea of you could be part of a subgroup and have friends and have a cool community and sports not be a part of it. And in some cases in reality, and in some cases just because it's what you saw on TV all day, those groups were positioned as like, you know, but the against the preps and the jocks and stuff like that. Right. And with the knowledge that like, you know, there were people who went to goth poetry readings and then played on their high school cross country team or whatever it is. Like those groups have always been more porous than we like to admit. But certainly that was the way I think a lot of it was positioned. And Logan to me was one of the strongest voices of that. But you know, I remember like a lot of the poetry that we would hear at the poetry readings and stuff like that would often talk about like, that was right when the Yankees were getting really good again. There was a lot of talk. I think that was when the beginning would talk of cities paying huge amounts of money to sports things. The steroids conversation was a thing and how that was affecting health. And I think, if I remember, that was also the first time that the press was starting to really pay attention to the violence that was happening with some particularly football players, but players of all sports, you know, towards women, towards kids, towards things like that. And so I think there was just a lot of social factors happening that led to people, you know, feeling like some okay, maybe sports doesn't have to be the thing that everyone is supposed to care about anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I guess I can kind of imagine how sports had been a little bit more kind of ubiquitous, I think, societally, and how that's to some extent faded. It's interesting that revenue has gone up nonetheless in like all of the major sports, despite any of that conversation.
Right.
As it almost feels like it's become more of a luxury good in a way. You know, I mean, they have all these luxury boxes and you look at I mean, I'll just briefly mention the first 2 baseball games I went to. The first one, my friend's dad took me, my friend, and some other friends to a Yankee game. These were diehard Yankee fans. I think he grew up in the Bronx. I know he went to the school that was like across the street from Bronx Science, who used to all beat up the Bronx Science kids like after school kind of thing. Huge Yankee fan. We sat in the bleachers. The tickets were $1.
Yeah.
And then I think 10 days later, I went with my mom and my dad to my first Mets game. And they were like, sorry, the only tickets we have available are right behind home plate. And we're like, oh, okay. How much are those? $10.
Yeah.
So we paid $10 for the best seats in the house. That like, I don't even know if there's actually seats there anyway. Actually, there are, but like there weren't for a while. They had like a tunnel and it was amazing. And we were like, you know, 10 feet from Pete Rose and Mookie Wilson. And, you know, I was like, no, I like this. This is better than sitting out in the bleachers. But still, that was $10, you know, and we would mostly sit in the upper deck, but it was like $5 or something. And they're so expensive now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was an ad campaign at one point when I was in college talking about how you could go to Shea Stadium, at that point, the place where the Mets played, and not the best seats, but you could get seats for cheaper than a movie ticket.
Right.
And that was the specific thing. And I remember, like, that was also part of when, I think in high school, every now and then I would suggest, like, hey, do you want to go to a Met game? People would look at me like I, you know, suggested we go to
Like go to a movie or go to
No, they would look at me like
Oh.
it suggested I go to like a kitten slaughtering or something.
Oh,
you
I
know,
see.
like,
I
how
see.
could
I thought you meant
possibly
when
do
you
that?
asked me, and then we would actually maybe go.
Oh, yeah,
But
no.
you meant yes. Would you like to go to kitten slaughtering?
Probably not. No, I hope not.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and what was that like in terms of the movie for you? Because I think again, like a lot of the movie is about her at first really kind of judging him, but then her getting more involved. And I mean, part of what I liked about it was I felt like it showed an even-handedness of there is something important about the fact that sports is always, it's not something he just has to grow out. As you said, that the line you mentioned is the exact line that has always stuck with me about the movie, of the idea of I do still care about something I cared about when I'm 8 years old, and that's important.
Yeah.
But then also there's some maturing that he needs to go through in terms of adjusting the role that his team, Arsenal football, plays in regard to the rest of his life. But especially in those first parts, kind of how did you react to those parts of the movie of him being called a yob and her friends getting on her for for shagging the football guy and all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember when I watched it exactly what my reaction was, but I watching it now, it definitely did feel like this sort of like, one click versus another click kind of, and the kind of like, condescending, like haven't you grown out of that yet kind of thing, when it's something that the person cares about a lot. But at the same time, like he was kind of childish and naive about other things, right? About like disclosing their relationship and about, what life is going to be like if they stay together and not, but at the same time, like he had very real skills in terms of teaching and being able to relate to the parents of the kids. And I think that's kind of where I feel like the movie really shined, is that it's not like he was this like, it's not either like he was this immature kid who just needs to grow up, or like his way was the right way and she was wrong and like kind of the wet blanket girlfriend, and then just kind of like came around. Like I feel like she came around to understanding, like the main character of the film is his fandom of Arsenal, right? That's like the main, that's the main thing.
Relationship.
That's the main relationship. Yes. I mean, at the end, I guess spoilers. Can we have spoilers?
Yeah.
Is it full spoilers? Where she's pregnant and they're, going to be together and whatever. And he's like, it was a great year for the three of us, me, her, and Arsenal. Like he doesn't mention the baby, right?
Yeah.
He's like, and Arsenal. and it really is. It's like, it's his relationship with the team. But but I think what she understands by the end of it is it's not his relationship with the team. It's his relationship with the idea of the team and the community and the fan base of the team, really, right? The scene where he almost misses the championship winning goal is, it's not him and her. She tries to get there, whatever, because she kind of gets him now. She realizes that when he said she was like their manager, like or coach, I think they call him manager, right? That like that was actually a compliment. It sounded like a backhanded compliment, but that her students actually said she was like this guy and that was actually a good thing. And I think she came to understand that like it was his relationship with being a fan, not just like, because I think there's this idea that rooting for a sports team is all about like living vicariously through athletes, right? And like that can be an aspect of it, but to me the more positive aspect is the relationship with the community. And so in that climactic scene where she tries to go to like be there with him, and then it doesn't work out because he thinks she's like a telemarketer or whatever, door to door, like, so go away, it's the worst 1 minute of my life. And then he comes back in, it's him and Mark Strong, his buddy, who's like a diehard, who's like, it's not over. And he's like, it might as well be 8-0. It's like, well, it's easier to win 2-0 when it's 0-0 than when you're down 8-0. Right. And so I really appreciated that, like they had him there, like with his boy, with the other fan. But also that like earlier they showed, then they showed the kid there with his mom. Like, it's not like it has to be like a men only thing, right? It's like, It can be a family. It can be friends.
And I think that's one of the things I liked most about the movie is that there's a couple directions where I thought it was going and then it doesn't. Because one of the things that we learn, some of the movie is told through flashbacks of like that after his parents divorced, he really have a way to connect with his father until his father started taking him to games. And that was an important thing. And as we later learned, he becomes much more of a fan than his father, and that's a whole other thing.
And he shares that with his mother.
Right, exactly. His mother
and his sister.
Yeah, and they become big fans. And then and he's a high school teacher. He teaches American literature, which is, I will say, as someone who's constantly listened to, I think there's an awful lot wrong with America, but I do think we have some nice pieces of our culture. And seeing so many Europeans say that the American culture is bullshit, seeing Colin Firth teach American literature made my heart go happy. Steinbeck and stuff.
I feel like it said modern American literature, and I was like, is there any other kind?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, Nathaniel Hawthorne and stuff like that.
Sure. There's older. I mean, I exaggerate, but not by a matter of centuries.
He's talking about Steinbeck, which is the 40s,
Yes.
But he's also the coach of his own school's team, and he's clearly quite good at that, and he's good at motivating them. And
helping them when they struggle to feel okay about it,
Right,
like,
and to be okay when they don't do the best, and losing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In many ways, the advice he gives them about losing, the thing is that he can't take it himself, and his own team is losing. But to me, the moment that really kind of I cringed a bit because I thought it was going in a direction, but it doesn't, is partway through the movie, they show that he's good. He's like, he's got a good, not inappropriate in any way, but a good parent, teacher-student relationship with the kind of star of the team. And that kid is also going through a divorce, but his dad won't take him to games anymore. He's moved away. His mother doesn't think it's safe for him to go to games alone, and he asks if the coach will go with him.
Right.
And you really see how torn up he is about it, but he holds to the boundary of that wouldn't be appropriate. And then we see him coaching the kid's mother when she comes to a parent-teacher night in how to take him to the game and what she needs to know. And I had a moment of wondering, have I misjudged the rom-com? Is the whole point, as you said, that this fellow teacher is the wet blanket who doesn't want him to enjoy his things, but actually the real love interest is going to be the mother of this boy?
Oh,
and I was so glad they didn't do that.
No. No.
I mean, terrible. But you can see, I was like, oh, this is a British movie. We're okay, because that's the thing Hollywood would love to do with this kind of story.
I could see that pothole. I will say I have taken one of my students to baseball games, although I guess my student took me to baseball games. But
Taekwondo, you're also not officially regulated by the state in the same way.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, there's some regulation still there, to be sure.
Yeah.
There's a couple other directions I want to take us, but what else about this movie or about this conversation do you want to jump in with?
Let's see. Oh yeah, just the fact that it's Arsenal was actually meaningful to me. Because I don't know to what extent you recall, but my nickname in high school was the Arsenal.
Oh wait, what was this? Say that again.
In high school, I was referred to as the Arsenal.
Oh no! Oh yes, because of the role.
Because I had the trench coat and the black hat, and I'd be at a poker game and someone I'd be like, oh, don't worry, I have a burrito in my pocket, and I'd take out a giant burrito, and I just had everything on me, and so I was referred to as the Arsenal, and so I wasn't super into soccer, which I'll call it soccer, which by the way is a term that comes from England, for what it's worth. It's it's foreshortening of association football. But I was into playing, and I liked the idea of it, but there just weren't a lot of games on TV. And also I feel like it's different sports at different times are better in how well they're televised. And I think soccer is a difficult game to televise well. I'm sure it's better now than it was before, but in terms of really being able to follow the action while also being able to kind of see the people as people doing athletic things, I think is a challenge. But Arsenal was always my team, even though I didn't really follow, but I was just that's the team that I root for, even if I don't really know anything about what's going on.
Well, and to me, I thought you were going in a different direction, which is that So the movie is about Arsenal winning its first championship in like 20 years, and how they'd been pretty bad for a long time, but they finally win.
Yeah.
And the movie is very much about them being underdogs.
Right. Yes.
They win. I think it's in '89 that the movie is set. Starting in the mid to late '90s, they kind of became the Yankees or the Dodgers of Europe, of English football.
They started winning a lot. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
After,
and
I think they won the season after this movie came out, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, very much so. Kind of like how the American version's about the Red Sox winning for the first time in however many years.
Yeah, while they were filming it, they were winning, and then they're like, oh, we have to do rewrites and include this amazing run. Yeah. Which also, by the way, Arsenal wins by beating Liverpool 2-0 in the last match of the season. Liverpool and the Boston Red Sox are both owned by, I think, Fenway Sports Group.
That sounds about right. All the connections, the Yawkey family or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that got us onto this conversation, shifting a bit, and I think it's an important thing in the movie, and one thing I want to talk about is sports isn't always about winning. And you and I have been having some interesting conversations that I thought would be interesting to continue here, because it's what the movie also deals with. Is like, it's great to be fans of a team when they win, but when your team loses, and especially losing can kind of go in two ways. One is your team can just suck and it's terrible and it's horrible, or your team can get really close, and then it's one thing you can be beaten by a better team. But a lot of times also it feels like you should have won. We made the mistakes. We did the things. The coach made that one choice that, of course, I sitting on my couch.
Right. I knew that was a mistake.
Yeah. I was up in the bleachers behind third base, but I could see that ball was a strike. What's the problem with that ump?
Exactly.
80 times closer. But, I think one of the things that, and in that scene where he thinks that his team is going to lose, as you said, he kind of shouts her out, and he's kind of for the last week of the season, it looks like his team is going to blow it, and he's kind of a jerk to everyone around him.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about how sports can be both an important lesson in learning how to deal with failure and loss, but also can just be kind of a kick in the head every day until it no longer is a healthy or fun thing.
Right.
Talk about that. What has sports taught you, or what has sports taught you about losing and failure, or what have you learned about those things that have influenced you as a sports fan? Or as a baseball fan, or a Mets follower? Sure.
I would say the biggest lesson I learned was just the first year that I watched baseball, 1986. The Mets were this overwhelming favorite to win everything, every step of the way. And during the regular season, they just dominated. It was never close. There was no pennant race. It was just... They won the season practically in May, and it doesn't end until September, right? Not literally, but just it was never close. They're rivals from the year before. They just swept in a 4-game series in St. Louis, and they're arch rivals. And it was just the season was just about watching them win games. 2 out of every 3 games they won, and it was oh, okay, that's cool, But then in the postseason, in the playoffs, the NLCS, and in the World Series, they managed to get themselves in a big hole and basically bring it down to the wire and make it look like they were going to lose, despite being a favorite. But so they played like the underdog, right? And in both of those series, they had these amazing come from behind wins that that capped there's a rally, and then they win, and they're going to lose, and then they win, and both in terms of the overall scope of the series, where they lose the first 2 to Boston, and then also where they're down to their last strike in game 6, and then they win, and then 2 days later there's game 7, right? Because sometimes it rains, which is why they didn't play the next day. And then they also had to come back in game 7 and win, and then they almost blew it, but then they didn't. And I feel like the lesson that taught me was just never give up. It doesn't matter if you're losing, you give it everything you have when you're competing, and if you win, you win, and sometimes you lose, which the next year taught me pretty well, and the year after that, and the year after that, and all the years since. But it really, I feel like every game I've ever played since then, every game I can remember playing, I don't remember, in chess, I don't resign, almost ever. There's some cases where you can say, okay, and but like for the most part, it's just like that taught me just like never give up. Just if you're competing and you're fighting for something, just keep fighting so long as you have one strike left, essentially. And baseball is a game, at least before, without a clock, right? There's no match clock. There's no you could just keep fouling balls off, and then it's like, okay, now you hit the ball and it goes between the guy's legs and you win the game.
In football, if you're down by 21 points with 15 seconds left to go, like it is just an impossibility because of the ability of the other team to spend time that you're going to win that point. Same with hockey, same with basketball. In baseball,
like tennis.
In baseball, you can have 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th and be 10 runs down, and theoretically you can keep playing because until that 3rd out is recorded, the game never, ever ends.
Right, exactly. And, and other just little things along the way, like the Seattle Mariners in 2001, they blew a 12-0 lead, I think. It was like one of the worst blown leads in history, and they won 116 games that year, which, by the way, is the most games anybody's ever won in a Major League Baseball season.
Yeah.
And then they lost in the playoffs because that happens, right? And so I feel like there's all of these lessons that can be learned, like specifically from baseball, and I think other sports have some of the same lessons and some of their own, right? A game with a clock, manage your time well, right? Like that's not really a baseball lesson. That's a soccer lesson, a football, whatever kind of football lesson. But the idea that one pitch doesn't define you, one at bat doesn't define you, one game doesn't define you, one season doesn't, right? As a performer, as a competitor. So I think, there are a lot of life lessons that you can get if you choose. There's maybe some bad ones you can get too, one thing about baseball that, as a poker player, paying a lot of attention to baseball while playing a lot of poker, there's variance in both games, right? Which basically means you put in your best effort, or you put in whatever effort you can. You exercise your skill to whatever ability you have at the time. And then something happens. And the more skill that you are able to execute, right? The more skillfully you're able to execute the things you can control, the better the distribution of outcomes will be.
Right.
But that's still just a distribution of outcomes. And that distribution of outcomes always includes winning and losing, right? It's just the better you are, the less likely you are to lose, the less likely you are to maybe strike out, the less likely you are to, do whatever it is that you don't want to do, and the more likely you are to do the thing you want to do. But there's just chance. There's a ball bounces this way, somebody else was thinking something, and it's not like you were doing some kind of leveling thing where you're trying to trick them or whatever. It's like they decided today I'm going to sit fastball, right? And you throw your fastball and they beat you, and you're like, man, that guy never sits fastball. And it wasn't, they were like, oh, this day I'm going to do it because of this. They're just like, I'm just going to do this, and that's chance too. And there's so much randomness in baseball, in poker, in a lot of sports, but like baseball is really maybe one of the most random sports of like the major sports that people play and watch and pay money to go see. I feel like that's such a good lesson for life, because almost everything you do, your effort over a long period of time has a lot to do with what results you're going to get. But over a short period of time, there's a really good chance you're not going to get those results. And over a long period of time, there's still an element of randomness. There always is, right? Like even just like putting a glass of water on a table. It's like, if there's an earthquake, like maybe it doesn't get to the table, there's all sorts of just things that you might take for granted that, and that's an extreme example where it's like, well, that seems like something, if you do it well, you should just be able to do it. Right. But so many other things, there's so much chance in life. And the interesting thing about being a sports fan or viewer is you're invested in the outcome, but it's basically all chance for you, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't actually influence it. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to be like, oh, well, they scored a run while I was turned this way. So I'm definitely not going to turn back that way.
Yeah, you gotta have the rally cap on. You got to eat the donut at the exact right time in the game.
Exactly. So it's, or it's like, oh, well, I didn't watch when they won that game, so I can't watch the next game, or then they'll lose, and it'll be my fault, right? And it's like, well, none of that really makes much sense, but like it makes sense, and because it's like it feels like you have to be able to do something to influence the outcome, right? And when you're at the place, like maybe you can a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Because,
like,
and that he says that in the movie at one point.
Yes.
He's like, if I'm not there yelling on my team, what if we needed that one little bit more of support? And
exactly.
We've kind of touched on two different topics that I want us to do later episodes about, possibly on this podcast, possibly if I can dragoon Paul into a just poker and philosophy and life podcast, one of which is on variance and just all the many ways it affects us, all the many ways people don't understand variance and how much that causes problems and everything from like our personal relationships to our international politics, but also in terms of our need for control. Because, and there's so many studies about this, again, this will be a whole podcast into itself, the human brain is programmed, like why we are successful evolutionarily in part, opposable thumbs help too, but also is because we can see patterns and we love patterns. And the result of that is that we are so good at fighting chaos that we don't know what to do when there isn't a pattern.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if your brain is going to create patterns when there aren't some. And some people call that incredible genius, and other people call it autism or OCD or extreme paranoia. And often they're both. Like it can be,
and to some extent, there's just being human.
Yeah, being human.
Because people just find patterns in things no matter what.
Right. Exactly. But sometimes you can find the patterns that aren't there. And I think this is one of the ones that, and this is everything from trying to figure out why the hitter who has hit the home run in this exact situation 3 other times doesn't hit the home run, all the way back to thousands of years ago, trying to figure out why burning the incense in this particular way made the rain fall the last 3 harvests, but it didn't this year, and all your crops died.
Yeah.
And like that's just always a thing. And I think sports is like, it's an entree into that and a way to deal with that. I do think it's interesting though, and maybe it's partly because I framed it, but also just our different opinions on that. I tried to frame that as primarily about losing and what losing teaches.
Okay.
And I think that was the thing you kind of didn't talk about really at all. and so I'll ask this, and in part because we were talking about this at a time when our Mets team had been dominating for a lot of the year. They were statistically literally the best team in baseball for the first couple months in terms of...
I can't hear you. I think you cut out.
Hold on.
I don't know if it's you or me.
I will find out.
Is it you?
Testing.
I don't hear anything. Hold on. Let me make sure.
Testing.
No, it's me. Hold on. Sorry. Technical malfunction.
La 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 la. I'm gonna just keep talking so you can figure out, you can hear me when I'm ready.
Are we better now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh my goodness. What are we doing?
What are we doing? We are flying through the... Do you know we're moving at like 80,000 miles right now?
Okay.
Per hour.
Is this better?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Because I'm going to keep talking.
Still can't hear you. Why would this be?
You can't hear me.
Why would this suddenly happen?
Let
me
try
a different
Maybe it's
thing.
the NSA. Do you think it's the NSA? Could the NSA be like fucking with us in some way? I don't think so. We haven't really talked
about this. Audio.
The man.
Do the thing that's not bad.
Oh, why don't I check if we've got any commentary? I don't think we have. We
have
any comments.
Oh.
No one loves us.
Oh, wow.
We are unloved.
It played the Testing Your Speakers song. It was very loud.
Testing your speakers.
I still can't hear you. What?
On StreamYard.
The heck?
Have a great show. Testing the speakers.
Doesn't make any sense.
Like a happy.
This doesn't make any sense.
Have a great... Can you hear me now? I just muted and unmuted myself. Can you hear me now?
Okay, my headphones are definitely working, so I don't know why I can't hear you.
There's still nothing? Let's try this again. Let's go back. And now Paul was back. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Paulie, can you hear me? Can you hear?
I think it could be you. I don't know.
Paul, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yes. We're good now.
Mike was saying it was working the whole time, so
that's very weird. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, I put on these blue Mets color headphones, so if they win today, that's the reason.
That's the reason.
Just so everybody knows. That's how it
let's
works.
do a clap just so I can realign audio tracks. 3, 2, 1. So, and just for context, the Mets were a very good team most of the year. Well, they were very good the first couple months of the year, quite literally the best team in baseball by winning percentage. They've slowly started to fade in the last couple months, and the last 2 weeks, they lost 8 in a row. They've lost a bunch before that. They've just turned around with a win 2 days before we're recording, but still, it's been rough. And we've been talking about what is that like for a fan. What is it like for you going through losing streaks?
Yeah, it depends on the context for sure. I'd like to just briefly say what you said. Like,
sure, recontextualize it.
Through June 12th, they were the best team in baseball, as you said. They had the best record. Then their first baseman threw a ball a little high to the pitcher, who strained his hamstring, who had been their best pitcher to that point in the season, or one of. And then 2 other pitchers got hurt. And since then, they've been the second worst team in baseball.
Yeah.
That's including that 8-game losing streak, which it's this like collapse of, in this context of going into the year with optimism and having a lot of uncertainty, but like kind of, for me, a lot of it is actually kind of wrapped up in sort of having an intellectual confidence that this team was better, that it was like underrated. Yeah. And then seeing it do so well was like, it felt kind of validating. And, you know, even though I was like, well, they're probably not actually a 106 win team because that's the pace they were on. Right. But like since then they've been terrible, like almost 100, you know, 98 win pace or 98 loss pace, which is really bad. Right. That's really bad. And like just the conversations, that's the thing for me. It's like, if I just watch that, it's unpleasant. And then I talk to my mom about it, and I talk to you about it. You're basically the baseball people that I talk to. Right. And it's kind of like commiserating, right? Yeah. And that's fun, actually. Like watching the game, watching like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they blew another one. Or like, how did they blow this one? Like, how do they keep coming up with new ways to lose? Like, to quote Casey Stengel, who was the first manager of the Mets, they're referred to as the amazing Mets. He came up with that because he said every night we find a new way to lose. You know, it's amazing. Like, and when people talked about the White Sox last year, who broke the Mets record of most losses in a season, people were like basically saying it's unbelievable the ways they find to lose, right? It's not just like, oh, the other team scored more runs and it was kind of la-di-da. Those types of games, like, they're not really fun to watch for me, usually. It can depend on the context. Sometimes it's all right. But, like, I'm just like, all right, that kind of sucked, right? But it's the games where it's like, the starting pitcher goes 6 scoreless, you scratch out a run, then you hit a solo home run, you're like, okay, just hold it, just hold this. They gave up a run. Okay, it's fine. Yeah. It's they gave up another run. Okay, just hold it at 2. They blew it, and then they lose. Or even like then they almost score in the next inning, and it's like it's this roller coaster of emotions. And when there's like a balance between positive ones and negative ones, I find it fun sometimes, right? Like, I do think having some painful losses can make the exciting wins more exciting, right? I do believe that. Like, if they just won every single game, I think that would be pretty boring, right? Yeah. Winning a game 10-0 is like fun while you're scoring the 10 runs. And then the rest of the game is like a slog. Yeah. It's like, okay, sure, whatever, you know? Whereas like winning a game 1-0, that game is exciting the whole time. Right. Or winning a game 5-4 that you were losing 3-0, you know, it's like that game is exciting the whole time. Or maybe it's like you're just like, oh, how this is terrible. Yeah. This is terrible. We were watching a game in 2000 at your house, your mom's house, and it was 8-1 Braves, the Mets' mortal enemies. And I was like, jeez. And you know, I feel like I was sitting there like, they could come back. They could come back, you know? And like, really, like, to what extent do I believe that? And then they get some walks. It's like, hey, and they score one run. It's like, hey, just 6 more runs. And it's like, we're kind of making a joke of it. And then they score another and they score another. Yeah. And then it's like, oh my goodness, they just tied it. And then Mike Piazza blasts a line drive 3-run homer. And it's like, what did I just see? You know?
Yeah.
And like, to me, the point of being down 8-1 is that sometimes you can win 11-8.
Right.
And that's exciting. But then to get to the losing, yeah, I don't like it. Mm-hmm. And the thing about sports leagues with a championship is, say you have 30 teams, like you have in Major League Baseball, 29 teams, fan bases of 29 teams go home having lost whatever it is they were trying to win, right? For some teams, that might mean losing in the World Series, which is frustrating, but it still feels like, hey, that was a good season. You know, that was a good effort. Losing in the championship series, whatever. Making a good run and maybe not quite getting there, that can be a certain kind of painful, which is very different from like being way ahead and then blowing it, right? Which has happened before. And I'm like, I've seen this before. This isn't fun. Like, I don't like watching this. I don't want to listen to any podcasts when I'm doing that, when they're doing that, because I'm just like, I don't want to hear what these people have to say. I'm happy to talk to you about it. I'm happy to talk to my mom about it, you know, and like sometimes I feel like I'm the voice for optimism. Like, hey, you know, they actually still have a lead. I know it's been terrible, but it's a freaking miracle that they still have a lead, right? And like, that's real and that's amazing. And so like, maybe they won't blow it, you know? Yeah. But yeah, in terms of like learning to lose, I don't know. It's interesting because I mean, we talked about it, and like, I play poker for a living, and have at various points in my life, and there's just a lot of losing that's involved in that, because you just don't win every day, because no matter how good you are, you're supposed to lose sometimes because there's randomness, right? Same thing in baseball. No matter how good a baseball team is, if they're playing another major, you know, team of the same like league, they're going to lose sometimes. They're just not going to win every game. And being able to kind of stomach those losses, I think, is a really important like life skill. And I think being able to sort of, you know, like in the movie, they're like, okay, we just need to win the last 2 at home. And then they lose the first one at home, and it's like, oh, they've done it. They've blown it. You know, and then they draw the next one, right? And it's like, well, now they have to win 2-0 on the road, right? And it's like, well, that's impossible. But it's like being able to kind of recontextualize to be like, okay, all we have to do is win 2-0 on the road, right? Like, and to basically just adjust to what are the circumstances now, right? What's done is done. Where are we now? Okay, we blew the lead. Okay, how do we score again, right? And as a fan, it feels so different to me compared to as a competitor, you know, and having been, I mean, I played Little League, not like really serious baseball, and soccer wasn't like really serious, but poker and Taekwondo, I mean, not like huge Taekwondo matches or whatever, but just like ones that I cared about a lot, you know, and that feeling of, you know, a loss, like when you lose as a competitor, I think there's a way to take that loss, learn from it, kind of try and say like, okay, what mistakes did I make? Try and learn from that. And then like use it as fuel to train harder, right? Like the kind of hate of losing, the, you know, not fear of losing, but like the hatred of it, like that feeling and being like, I don't want to lose. So I'm just going to make myself as good as I can at this thing.
Right.
I think that can be powerful. As a fan, I've never, I don't know. It feels different to me. It's
not the same at all. I don't have that power.
Yeah, and like I don't know. I have like a lot of wisdom on it. You know, it's there is a, you know, the sort of comforting, like there's always next year kind of, right? It's like, okay, you know, until it ain't over till it's over, and then like once it's over, well, there's next year, right? And
I think there's a great lesson there also in terms of expectations. And
yeah,
a whole lot. Paul and I've had some interesting conversations about losing and stuff like that we'll probably get into more other times. But I really love the way you contextualize that. And I'll just kind of add, I think in some ways there's a lot of ways in our relationship to the media we consume. I'm a lot more of an emotional masochist. I just sometimes enjoy things that make me feel bad.
Right. Yeah.
But also, like, one of the things that I've been feeling as I watch this is that, like you said, I love the comeback. I love being an underdog.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the best season the Mets have ever played in our lifetimes, by many definitions, 1986. In some ways, I think if we watched it as adults, we probably would have felt kind of A, because it was kind of boring. B,
during the season, you mean?
Yeah,
not
during the postseason.
Not the postseason.
During the postseason.
Yeah.
B, they were a very hated team. Like, there's a book about them called The Bad Guys Won.
Yes.
And while I think some of it is wrong and some of it is misunderstanding New York, they were kind of assholes in a lot of ways. And as an adult, I might have wrestled with that more. But more to the point, like you said, I think for a lot of teams, last year, we were awful the first couple months of the season, and we were doing pretty bad for a while. And so to have this, what felt like magical run, where one of our backup kind of part-time, sometime players releases a reggaeton song that gets really popular, and all of a sudden we're this magical team that's doing crazy things out of nowhere, and we win, and we get to the championship series, and we lose in the championship series, and we're ecstatic. And the Yankee fans I knew got to the World Series and were miserable because they lost.
Exactly.
And there's definitely an entitlement that comes from winning. And I've talked with Boston Red Sox fans about this, about how they were always on the one hand, they'll say they were always the underdog because it felt like, every 10 years they would get to the World Series and they would lose again.
Yeah, they'd get one strike away and then they'd lose to the Mets.
And how many fandoms could you say, poor us, we get to the World Series once every 10 years?
Yeah, sure.
And they'd go, you fucking assholes. We haven't close to the World Series since my grandpa was here, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
the Mariners have never gone to the World Series.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly. It was the Red Sox. Yeah, they lost in 86. It sucked. They lost in 78. It sucked. They lost in 75. It sucked. They lost in the 60s. It sucked. But, they kept going to the World Series. They kept being the second best team in the league.
Exactly.
In the major league.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just think there's an important lesson there about being able to look at success and look at failure and in context. And that it is great to do well, but when you start to take it for granted and start to expect it, and anything but winning is not acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it just kind of makes you a miserable fan. It makes you kind of miserable to everybody else too, at least in my experience.
Yeah. I mean, did I mention this quote yet? You've got some kind of disease that turns people into miserable bastards.
No.
That's another quote from the movie. Yeah, she says that to him. And I feel like, I think the reason like this season and 2007 are the 2 years that I've found the most frustrating. 2006, the Mets got to the National League Championship Series. They were one game away, one swing away from getting to the World Series, and they were the huge favorite in that series, but then everybody got injured, blah blah blah, they lost, and that was the first time in a while that I was like, oh, I think I hate losing like a lot, and interestingly, that was the year that I started playing poker for a living again. I don't know if it's related, but the year after that, they were again like this huge favorite, and then they just blew it. Just down the stretch, epic collapse, one of the worst collapses in baseball history. And this year, after this magical last year, this year, I went into it with like an expectation that they'd get to the playoffs. Like, okay, they're not going to be the best team in baseball. Fine. That's okay. I just want them to get to the playoffs in back-to-back years, which they've only done one other time. And that barely counts because it's this stupid one-card wild card game. But it would be like that. But also they made it in 2022. So it would feel like it was this progress towards like kind of expecting a certain level of winning, Right. And I know a lot of people say, oh, unless you get to the World Series, it's not really progress. Or like, unless you win the World Series, it's all or nothing. And I'm like, no, it's like, I just like wanted to see the team like make the playoffs 2 years in a row. Right. For pretty much the second real time, because the wild card series, the one game playoff was kind of goofy. And like, then having that be like 95% likely. And then now it's like 75% likely. And it was like 65% for a couple days. And everybody who looks at those, by the way, there was an article today that was like basically like, here's why our playoff odds are pretty correct. You're welcome, Mets fans, because everybody looking at that number is like 80%. It's more like 80% they blow it. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But this is through the genius of math as opposed to human intuition, and the truth probably lies somewhere between them.
Right.
I would say, but
in baseball, in all sports, but especially in baseball, we love to talk about narrative.
Yes.
And when it comes to statistics, there's the old idea of, like, dice have no memory.
Right.
And like, if dice roll a 6 2 times in a row, it does not mean either that they're going to stay on the streak or that they're due for some other number.
Right.
If they roll 6 30,000 times in a row,
it's probably just a dice that's going to land on 6 all the time. Yeah, exactly.
And like, baseball statistics have no memory, but baseball players do. And there is streakiness, but there also is a lot of the things that we look at and impose a narrative upon them. There is a lot more variance than we like to think. And that's a lesson you've had to really drum into me, because I think, like, sports pages have statistics, and we care a lot more about the statistics than we used to. But, like, ESPN, like, people talk. It's not just, numbers on screen after screen after screen.
Yeah.
It's narrative. We love narrative around sports. We love narrative around everything.
Yeah.
And the fact that we want to impose narrative on statistics that often isn't there is a whole other discussion as well to be had.
Yeah, and I would say that baseball is a game that has always been, like, very interested in statistics. It's more that I think it's less that people care more about statistics now than they used to. I think it's more that people care about different statistics than they used to.
Well, I also think that you have
there's more
access. You have more access to statistics, and, like, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, the sports pages, you'd have the box score, but you read for, like, the columnists and the people like that. And now, like, there are whole websites that are just dedicated to, statistical analysis, where people will write in-depth articles who haven't themselves watched a single pitch of the game. They're just analyzing the stats and able to make very good analysis because the stats do tell you an awful lot.
Yeah. I always read the box scores, but
so did I.
And like, I think that's been a thing. Like, how many RBIs someone has, what's their batting average? Like, these were the statistics people traded in, right? And then there was the narrative as well. And now it's there's the number of statistics that are easily available, like, average exit velocity, like, induced vertical break, like the things that are available there's so much more statistics than there were. I'm just saying, I think baseball always had this, like, this was one of the things, 61 asterisk, like, they put a freaking asterisk by the home run record because the 60 was so cherished by them. And they're like, oh, well, now they're playing more games this season. Like, okay, that's actually a legitimate complaint, but also that's how many games there are now in a season.
Yeah. It's the way it is. And and I think it's definitely, and I think baseball especially, like, there's just more data. Like, numbers are better with more data.
Yes.
There are more discrete, like in basketball, yes, you can track shoots, but the sport doesn't stop. It keeps going.
Right. Yeah.
Football, there's distinct plays, but, like, it's hard to isolate statistics. In baseball, it's a lot easier. Not 100% possible, but still a lot easier.
Yeah.
So it bears that statistical analysis. And we're almost at the hard wrap time, so I wanted to kind of say my last thing, and you say a last thing, is that it is the statistics that give, for me, the one last thing about baseball that I truly love, that I think is also, I fall back on this a lot when I feel like I'm not doing well enough in my life, which is that to be a good baseball player is to succeed at the thing you are supposed to do more than anything 30 to 35% of the time.
Yeah.
And, like, we think of, like, one of the best achievements in sports of all time is Ted Williams hitting 400. What that means is that he safely hit 40% of the time. And now, as you said, statistics have changed. We care a lot more about on-base percentage than we do batting average.
Yeah.
His lifetime on-base percentage, I think, is around, like, 480.
Yeah, which is
for baseball fans, amazingly, incredibly good.
Yeah.
But it also meant that literally him, who's considered one of the best, the arguments about who is the actual best is a thing, but he's easily in the top 3, top 5. more than half the times that he walked up to the plate, he walked back to the dugout afterwards because he didn't successfully hit the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. He was literally the best ever at not making an out. And he still made an out 51.8% of the time.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And so, like, you know, if you're successful at about half the things you want to do, like, hey, maybe that's fine, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, context matters. If you're like a, you know,
EMT,
surgeon.
Like
yeah, exactly. That, exactly.
But, you know.
But, like, if you're a writer and half the things you write are brilliant and half are crap, like, that's fine. People won't read the crap that much, and, you know.
I know writers who would sell their soul for like 1 out of 10.
You know? Exactly. So.
All right. Any other last comments you want to throw out there?
Yeah, just I just wanted to kind of go back to memories for a moment, just in terms of not in deep, but just
Oh, actually, there's one last thing I want to say about sports and baseball and stuff, but go ahead.
So, you know, my mom was really the sports person, you know, in the family. But you know, 2 of the last really good memories I have of my dad, who died when I was 8, were watching Game 6 of the World Series in 1986, when the Mets were down to their last strike, and I was just as invested as a human can be in the outcome of something that ultimately doesn't really like mean something in terms of like intrinsic value, but just what it meant to me was so much. And I just remember watching that, and like, I didn't believe it was over. I knew it wasn't over. My friend's dad was telling my friend, hey, don't be a jerk after the Red Sox win this game, because Paul's going to be really upset. And my dad just like sitting behind me, like stroking my back.
Yeah.
And then the Mets won, and my friend was trashing his Red Sox hat that he'd apparently gotten just for the World Series or something, which was kind of funny.
Did you listen to his father's advice and not be a jerk back to him and his father, I hope?
Yeah, I was just excited. I mean, whatever. The Yankees had already lost. Who cares? He wasn't really rooting for the Red Sox. He was just, you know, rooting for the AL. And then Game 1 was the last game we went to. And it was a 1-0 shutout that Ron Darling pitched brilliantly, but a ball went between Tim Tuffle's legs. That ended up being my screen name on this Mets message board, where I had thousands of posts through the wickets. And they lost that game. And that's kind of like my memory of what losing feels like a 30-degree October night, sitting up in the mezzanine where you can't even see the ball when it goes up too high because the overhang's a little low, and it's cold and there's no runs, and you lose on like a dumb play, and like, but then you can still win. You can still have that Game 6 memory, you know?
Yeah.
But then my mom was the real like baseball fan growing up, and so, you know, that season as well. But then obviously after my dad died, she was the one who would like throw balls to me, hit balls to me, like, you know, help me practice fielding and hitting, and take me to games. And then she was the reason I watched Fever Pitch, because she saw Colin Firth in Pride and Prejudice, and she'll like see an actor in something, think they're great in it, and then watch like their entire catalog.
And he's amazing in that. So
he's fantastic. He's fantastic. And so we saw Fever Pitch, and that was like when I, you know, saw that and was like, hey, Arsenal.
Yeah.
I'm the Arsenal. So
I love that.
Yeah. And then now, you know, that actually, I think after my mom moved, like in 98, that was when I started watching baseball again. And we ended up, you know, we were living in different cities, and we talked a lot about baseball. And that's kind of how we like became really good friends, you know, and like I consider my mom a really good friend, not just like a family member, which it's just really meaningful to me to have those memories of my dad, and then to be able to share that with my mom now. So.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I've been able to talk to your mom some about baseball, and that's been fun. And like I said, basketball is a big thing connecting me to my dad in hard times. And I'll just close with what I think is my favorite sports memory, and my favorite memory of the importance sports can play. Because obviously I'm way too young for Jackie Robinson or anything like that. And it's one that we've mentioned on this podcast before. Paul knows exactly what I'm talking about. And because it's September 15th, I'm thinking about it again, which is the first baseball game played in New York City after 9/11. And it was just like, there've been some moments in baseball history, I'm sure this is true for every team, because again, and like, it's not because I think there's fate, it's because there's been enough baseball games that some will magically align.
Sure.
But the New York City had just been attacked in this horrible, terrible way. We were all shocked. Our president was now warmongering about what our city had gone through. I know the rest of the country was attacked as well, but for us New Yorkers, I think there was a real feeling of like our city was attacked.
I think it felt different. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. And again, not to denigrate other attacks
Sure.
that happened that day, but the Mets had just been in 98, 99, 2000. The Braves had really been our bugaboo. We got past them in 2000 because someone else beat them. 2000, we went to the World Series. We lost. 2001, we were not as good again. We were starting to maybe come back, but we were facing a big chase to try to catch the Braves. And we play this game against the Braves. They go up ahead against us. And then in the late innings, one of our players gets on base. And then Mike Piazza. We've often had star catchers, like Gary Carter was the big star, one of the big stars of the team that we grew up with. Now Mike Piazza. And he just hits this epic home run that wins the game. It wasn't a walk-off, but basically won the game. And it was just, first of all, the moment of silence that I heard that we did before that game is the loudest silence I've ever heard in my life. And it was moving.
It was a sold. It was 55,000 people making no sound.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't think it was possible.
In
you
a
could
space
hear the
that,
flags flapping.
Yeah, and it's space that each of us had been to dozens of times before. We were so used to hearing just constant background noise.
Yeah. And it was the loudest place that I think I'd ever been on Earth.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
just the way it exploded into cheers when that ball cleared the fence. And it's funny, I was listening to another game on 9/11 this year where John Smoltz, who was one of the Braves pitchers that year, and he talked about how he was in the bullpen watching that game, for that game.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, like, look, I am always going to want my team to win.
Yeah.
That year, we had a big lead. We weren't terribly worried. And frankly, we kind of looked at each other and were like, this is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I kind of love. And granted, he wasn't playing in the game. If he'd been the pitcher throwing, throwing it probably didn't. There have been theories about like, oh, he served up a meatball because he wanted to help heal. No, screw that. People want to win. We would hate it.
Piazza crushed a baseball. This wasn't some outlier event. It was what he did.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that the pitchers on the other team, and John Smoltz is one of the most competitive people who's ever played. He's a great competitor.
Yeah.
And even he was like, yeah, we felt the power of that moment. We're okay with this.
Like, okay, they can have this one. Fair enough.
So, all right. Well, this has been a great conversation, Paul. Thank you as always. Thank you to our listeners. We will be back into other more traditional superhero topics next week, but I hope you enjoyed this, and may the force be with you.
We talked about Robert Redford. He's in the best Marvel movie. Am I right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
One of.
Fair.
Peace.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I meant rewatch the